Katz. Thank you for the honor of being able to finish this session for you. Thanks to the Rabbi for his permission. We spoke about free will in the previous session. Let's try to take this one step further, which is ascending, if you like, in consciousness to the place where our notion of free will comes from. The question I'd like to deal with and challenge you with is the question of how we know what is right. Where does our moral knowledge actually come from? So this is a difficult exercise, I must warn you, and I'm going to ask you to be thinking through this with me. I must say you look thrilled. But I'm going to challenge you if that's okay, and let's think through this together. I think you'll find this rewarding, even though it's a bit of an effort. Can I just ask those people to sit down and... Don't you want a seat? Okay, so in 1967, a very interesting British philosopher by the name of Philippa Foot wrote an article about a moral challenge which I'd like to share with you. By the way, she was a very interesting lady. She was the daughter of a famous First World War English aristocratic hero and an American woman who actually, her mother Sarah was born in the White House in 1898. She was the daughter of the American president at the time. Who was American president in 1898? Grover Cleveland. So Sarah was the daughter of Grover Cleveland. She married an Englishman. They had a daughter, Philippa. She was raised in an era where women were not supposed to be educated. They were just supposed to look good. She never went to school. She was tutored at home. And when she was admitted to Oxford at a very young age, her parents were devastated. The neighbors tried to console the parents by telling them that at least she didn't look clever. But anyway, the point is, she became a very well-known moral philosopher. She was a friend of Elizabeth Anscombe, who was a well-known Catholic philosopher, and part of the intelligentsia of that age. Now, Philippa Foot wrote leading works, texts in terms of moral philosophy, and she became very recognized in the field. I actually have a personal debt to her because she started the Oxfam shops and I get a lot of good second-hand books in Oxfam. But anyway, the point is that in this article, it was an article dealing with the ethics of abortion. I don't have to remind you that in the 1960s was the whole turmoil about abortion. The American law changed, a woman's right to her body and so forth, and traditional values were being overturned. And in debating the morals and ethics of abortion, which is not something I want to talk about at all, she proposed a moral exercise, a thought experiment, to bring out how people think about morality. And she said this, and this has become very famous. To do this, I'll have to illustrate it. So let me do that. I don't know if you know that I'm a very accomplished artist. And here is our scenario. We have a trolley line, okay, and on the trolley line is a trolley. Coming down the line. Unfortunately, on the line, 5 people are tied to the track. And these 5 people, actually in her original scenario, she had you as the driver of the trolley, but later thinkers have challenged that because it makes things a bit more complicated. In fact, there's a Jewish lady professor at MIT by the name of Judith Jarvis Thompson who has modified, can you see my picture? They've modified this a little bit, so I'm going to give you the consensus of the modern way to think about this question. But this is the trolley coming down the line, 5 people about to get wiped out. You are standing innocently at the side of the track. This is where you are. You've got nothing to do with the situation. You're not driving the trolley. You're completely uninvolved bystander. There is a side track, known as, technical term is a spur, which goes off to the side. And there is a pair of points here that you can pull. And if you pull the lever, you divert the train away from the 5 people onto the side track. Unfortunately, on the side track, 1 person is tied down. So here's your dilemma. If you do nothing, you watch 5 people wiped out. The trolley's going to, by the way, in modern philosophy, this is now known as trolleyology. Okay. But that's, so, and it's a very rich field of research and many, many books have been written over the last 60 years. If you do nothing, the train wipes out 5 people. If you react fast, and you've no obligation here, you're completely extraneous to the situation, you adjust the track, the train goes down a side track and kills 1 person. If you would divert the train, please raise your hand. I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. Okay. You are in very good company. You're in very good company. About 95% of Western people, by the way, culture makes a difference. Asian people tend to value community over individual. Americans famously tend to value individual. There are national and cultural differences, but at least in massive surveys done in the United States, about 94 to 95% of people agree with you. In fact,
what did we say?
that you divert the train. Virtually, most people opted to divert the train. Okay, so you're a proud minority, but okay. Well, you're saving 5 people.
But you can't do with you.
Well, let me ask you this question. If there were only 5 on the track and no one on the side track, would you divert the train?
Yes.
So you have an obligation to save 5 people.
No, but you can.
Okay, so we'll get there. But most people disagree with you. Okay. 95% of you, if you'd like to research this, Harvard University has a website called Moral Choices, where they give you these types of dilemmas, and tens of thousands of people have clicked on their options. They're very rich research showing how many people feel in various ways. But about 95% of people, just under 90%, would do what most of you said and divert the train. How about this? Here is your situation. What's this? Bridge. Through the bridge is a train line. On the train line is a trolley. And on the track are 5 people tied down to the track. The train's going to go under the bridge and wipe out 5 people. Standing on top of the bridge is a large man. Big enough that if you push him onto the track, he will stop the train. He's going to get smushed, but he's going to stop the train. Raise your hand if you'd push him off the bridge. Only 2 people. 3? Only 3 people? Now, just 1 second. One second. You told me, I'm speaking to the majority. You told me that you would kill 1 person to save 5. That's what you said. So how come in this situation you would not kill 1 to save 5? All the difference, 1 second, just one second. 1 second. The difference is this. In this case, you brought a train to a man to kill him to save 5. In this case, you brought a man to a train to kill him to save 5. What's the moral difference? Direct action. Okay.
We're not God though. We can't.
Let's just focus on exactly the question. I knew you would say that. So you didn't notice. You hear the objection? Some people have said the reason they wouldn't push the man off the bridge is because that's a direct action. So I don't think it's valid, but I'll try to prove it to you. Let's notice that there's a trapdoor in the bridge. There's a lever here where you stand. All you need to do is pull the lever. The door's open and it's ever so gently lowered onto the track, okay? Now, what's the moral difference between the two? Why does it make a difference if you bring the person to the train to kill him or you bring the train to the person to kill him in the course of saving 5 people?
You're more detached if you put a lever.
I've given you the option of pulling a lever in both cases. Exactly the same.
You're more detached.
Why?
Are you more detached?
Why?
I think you've got a direct...
Why? You're pulling a lever in both.
Yeah, but direct connection to the man on the bridge.
What's your connection to him?
I think it's just a moral thing.
I think you've said something very deep. I'll come back to that in a moment. But I'm asking for a logical, cogent, philosophical distinction. Yes?
The guy on the bridge wasn't in any danger.
This guy is in no danger at all. The train never takes that track. It never has and never will. Unless you put the train in that direction. This fellow never falls off bridges. There's no danger to either one. And by the way, in halachic analysis, we always make all else equal. So you can't do that. In other words, in all exercises like this in the Talmud, or in logical analysis, we always do what the lawyers call ceteris paribus, all else equal. For example, if he's in danger, he's in danger. If this is your wife's mother, we don't make it those. We want the same level playing field. Okay, all variable. The only difference is, in the one case you move the train, in the one case you move the man. And both of them, your motivation is to save 5 people. What's the difference between the two? I'm not asking you what you would do or approve of. Why do people respond so differently to these 2 scenarios? Yes.
There's no difference.
Why do people respond so differently? 95% of people would divert the train, and 3 people in this room would push the man off the bridge. Yes. You're seeing them exactly the same distance, all else equal, yes.
It's not about the outcome.
Yes.
It's about the object that you're interacting with.
Why does it make a moral difference whether you interact with the train or the person?
To me, it doesn't.
So why did 95% people go one way and only 3% the other? Okay, so let's deal with this, because you're not doing too well. So let me say this. Before we get to an analysis of the difference, let me point this out. Watch this fascinating thing. I asked you who would divert the train in the first case. Your hands went up within seconds. In the second case, you were quite sure you wouldn't do it. When I ask you why, you don't know. That's very interesting. That means your morals and ethics are not logical. They come from here. What did you say? It's a moral thing. You just know it. Really? You making life and death decisions basis on the gut? That's very interesting. But I've got news for you. I think it's correct. Let me explain what I mean. Again, let's get the point clear. And by the way, you're not alone. Many surveys have been done. People respond with certainty about what they would do and find it very hard to articulate why. And we're talking about life and death here. Which shows, again, that our moral logic, our moral mechanism is somehow deeply imbued in our psyche. You did not go through, you didn't tell me because of some logical reason. You didn't even say because it's a Jewish legal obligation. You gave me no logic at all, but you knew what to do.
Conscience.
What is this conscience thing that is so clear?
We all have this conscience.
But it's more than conscience. It isn't only knowing what's right. And knowing what's right in one situation and not acceptable in another. And you can't explain why. So, the first point to make is, surprisingly and amazingly, I think an authentic Jewish approach is that you indeed should have a moral sensibility that works this way. Let me give you a couple of examples. And again, I'm going to suggest something to you that's wild. When you walked in through this door, and I asked, if I would have asked you this afternoon before you sat down, how do you know what's right? You would have said to me, because I'm logical. Or you might have said, because I'm religious, and I subscribe to Jewish and Torah values. And that's not correct. Let me give you the most extreme example I know. Listen to this, you won't believe me, but examine it. The Torah is full of human beings asserting their moral intuition so confidently they even find it possible to argue with God. Example. Abraham is minding his own business. God taps him on the shoulder. Avram, I'm about to kill the Sodomites. They've gone too far, they're wicked. Avram says, Hashem, Hashefet kol haaretz lo ya'aseh mishpat? Shall the judge of the whole world not do justice? He's accusing God of injustice. Who are you talking to? He doesn't pray for them. He says, if you do that, you'll be transgressing age. The right response is, Abraham, I'm God. I'm God. What I do is right by definition. How do you speak to God that way? God proposes doing a certain thing that he feels is morally correct, and you tell him he's conducting himself in immoral fashion. What are you saying? The Torah is full of this. The book of Job is full of this. When God says to Moses, to Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm about to wipe out the Jewish people, they've gone too far, they worshipped a golden calf. Listen to this. The Medrash says, Hashem, to do that would be immoral of you. You know why? Because you promised the whole Jewish nation to give us the land of Israel, and if you kill us in the desert, you're breaking your promise, and that's immoral. So the Medrash says, God said to Moses, okay, you know what I'll do? I'll kill them all, I'll save you. I'll generate a new nation from you, and I'll give them the land of Israel. The Medrash says, without a moment's hesitation, Moshe said, Hashem, that won't work. You promised the whole nation, all 12 tribes. I'm only the tribe of Levi. If you reconstitute the nation from me, you'll be breaking your promise. And the Medrash says God was unable to answer. That's the kind of lawyer you want working for you, by the way. What is going on? A human being accusing God of injustice, immorality, and winning the argument. But what is being said? By the way, you know what's interesting? A year and 2 months later, the Jewish people went through the same scenario. After the spies returned, God said to Moses, this time they've gone too far, I'm killing them. And Moses did not use the same argument. He said, Hashem, you can't do that because you'll discredit your name. People will say you are mighty enough to take us out of Egypt, but not mighty enough to bring us into Israel. You're a failure. That's a discredit to your name, and you ought not to do that. And Hashem said, okay. The question is, why didn't he use the winning hand that he had? He had a trump hand the year before. Unanswerable. And the answer is obvious. What was the answer the year before? He promised us the land of Israel. You guys have just rejected my land. The spies just rejected the land. All of them, all the tribes rejected the land. You can't raise that. How embarrassing would that be? He was unable to use that argument, so he used a weaker one. Okay, not a promise, but your holy name. But you talk, you're seeing examples in the Torah. Human beings are arguing with God on the basis of their moral intuition. Is that authentic? The answer is yes. You should have a natural sense of morality. Torah is supposed to evoke this and bring it out. Yes, to be sure, we live in a very confusing world. And there's all sorts of distortions. People don't even know if they're male or female today. So there's tremendous distortions in the world of a natural pattern. And of course you need Torah. But at root, if you're a highly developed, sensitive enough spiritual individual, Torah should be developing and evoking and evolving your natural sense of morality. Not to be something that's laid on top of you that's foreign to you. You should see it most clearly in mitzvahs between people. Taking a lulav, how do you identify with that? You have to be very spiritual to feel that spiritually. But treating people correctly? Definitely. And I'll suggest to you that when you treat people correctly, you should not be doing it as a mitzvah. You should do it because you value the person. Let's say you visit someone who's ill. Are you doing it because you're religiously motivated? Or you're doing it because you care about the person? The correct Jewish attitude is your religious motivation should be that you care for the person. If you're doing it because God said, you know what you're doing? Then the person's a lulav. Is an estrog. And the sicker he is, the better. The better mitzvah. You want him to really suffer. You know, I went to visit someone who was sick once. It took me a whole day. I schlepped a long way. Eventually, I make it to the hospital after hours of journey. I walk in. I said to the nurse, "Can I please sit?" She said, "No, he got better and he went home." I said, "What a chutzpah." He couldn't suffer another day. I can't understand, you know. Okay, that's not right. That's not right. So the idea of being a developed Torah Jew, Torah is supposed to bring out a natural, it should resonate with your own moral sensitivities. Let me give you one more example. This is again wild. You will instinctively disagree with me, but I think I can prove to you that I'm correct. Listen to this. In all human societies throughout all space and time, all human societies have always agreed on every single moral principle. Say that again. You can examine ancient cultures or modern. You can examine so-called sophisticated cultures. In every single human society, there's no disagreement about any moral principle. I'm talking about single moral principles, not when they conflict with each other. In no society can you steal because you feel like stealing. There's no place. Go to Papua New Guinea and steal the savage's breakfast next to you. You'll have your head. Try to take his woman. Killing somebody for no reason. There's no society that says they're okay. Breaking a promise when someone's relying on you and you promise them and you betray them and you let them down. That's immoral in all societies. Not showing gratitude to somebody who saves your life. That's universal. There is no disagreement and never has been on any. Unbelievable. How do all humans on earth agree about anything? To be sure, when moral principles conflict, there's no agreement. Can you hurt one to save many? Can you hurt animals for human benefit? For that you need Torah. But isolated single moral principles, there's no argument about that. How do we all have... So the evolutionists will tell you it evolved. We don't say that. We say we imprinted with the divine imprint. And so we know these things are right and we know them without being... And that's why in Judaism you can be held accountable for your actions even if you're never spiritually educated. The generation of the flood was wiped out. No one was given the Torah. You ought to know that killing and stealing is wrong. How ought you to know it? Conscience. It's innate. It's built into you. And I think that's authentic. Of course, when values conflict, then there's no... I'll just give you one. Listen to this. 10 years ago in Frankfurt, you probably won't believe this either, but it's true. Look it up. 10 years ago in Frankfurt, there was a wealthy industrialist, not in the Jewish world. He had a 10-year-old son who was being tutored by a 24-year-old university student. The child was kidnapped and disappeared. The police felt probably it was the student who'd done it, because he was demanding a high ransom. The chief of police in Frankfurt arrested the student and threatened he wouldn't admit what he'd done. So the chief of police said to him, "I have people on my police force who can inflict unbearable pain on you that will leave no marks on your body, and unless you admit what you've done, I will do it to you." And under threat of torture, he broke down and confessed. The child had been killed, in fact. They found the kid's body in a hut on a lake. The chief of police was then convicted for using threat of torture. Germany. He was given a suspended sentence or a year. He never used torture. Just threatening to use torture to save the child's life. Let me ask you a question. Raise your hand, please, if you think it's moral to torture someone. There's a bomb about to go off somewhere. Thousands of people are going to get killed. You found the person who's done it. He won't tell unless you torture him. Raise your hand, please, if you think it's correct to torture him. Okay, raise your hand please if you think it's wrong to torture him. I'd say 60-40. Interesting. Alan Dershowitz, famous American, he wrote a book on this subject, arguing that it's moral to torture terrorists to get information that will save lives. Most Americans disagree with him. So people disagree when there are moral issues in conflict. But isolated moral principles, everybody agrees. That's amazing. So the point I'm trying to make today is that we are born with an innate sense of morality. That is a correct and authentic Torah position. Of course it needs to be developed, and of course it can be distorted. But we're talking about a Torah education to sensitize children. Children, by the way, have a tremendous sense of what's fair and not fair. Little kids, you buy him a blue one and her a pink one, she'll want the blue, he'll want the pink. If you buy them both pink ones, they'll want each other's. Right? In case this is bigger or better, right? A tremendous sense. It's a natural inbuilt... Okay, now since you didn't solve the problem, let me tell you one or two solutions. I'll tell you Philip a foot solution. I don't think it's authentic Jewishly, but it's a well-known principle, and I'll show you how beautifully it resolves the conflict. And that's known as the principle of double effect. The doctrine of double effect, as it's known, DDE. This principle is very well known. It's attributed usually to Thomas Aquinas, who lived from 1248 to 1276, somewhere around there. Catholic thinker. And it's used in my own field of medicine. This is used all the time. Doctrine of double effect says you can do something that is bad if it's the second effect of something that is good. Classic application. A patient is desperately ill and fragile and in terrible pain. You need to give them a medication that will relieve the pain but might stop them breathing. That's acceptable and moral. Why? Because the death is a double effect. You're not doing it for that. You're doing it to relieve the pain. And if they die, they die. But that's not your motivation. This is called, by the way, in Jewish law, you are most certainly not only allowed, obliged to give pain relief even when it's dangerous, and it's enshrined in Israeli law, by the way. That's another question. Not quoting double effect. There's other reasons we will do that. But the point is that that's the rule of double effect. Now, double effect has 4 conditions. Follow me carefully. Condition number 1. The action you are doing must not be evil. The immediate action you are doing must be neutral or moral. Number 2. The bad outcome must be something you do not want. Not as a means nor as an end. 3. There must be no other way out of this dilemma. And 4. The calculus must make sense. 5 against 1. We're not talking about 1 against 1. There's 5 lives against 1. Clear? Let's go through them. Watch carefully. I think you'll enjoy this. Let's take this situation and apply the criteria. Let's just use criteria number 1 and 2. Is diverting a train neutral or immoral?
Immoral.
Diverting a train from one track to another.
Neutral.
It's a neutral act, isn't it? Any disagreements? What do you think?
Because if you divert the train, then you have to live with the rest of your life knowing that you murdered someone.
I think that's a... What's your name? Who? I think that's a fantastic point. I happen to agree with you. I'm not sure this is neutral. You're diverting a train that's going to kill somebody. I think it's a debatable point. But let's go to the second point. The second point is the death that occurs must be something you do not want. Do you want this man on the side track to die? Do you want the train to hit him? Definitely not. That's acceptable. Watch this. Is pushing a man off a bridge neutral or evil in the face of an oncoming train? Secondly, do you want him to get smushed? Yes, you do. You need him to get smushed. That stops the train. Do you get it? In this case, the reason you want him on the track is that's what stops the train. You want the train to hit him. You need it. Is this clear?
There's also a sequence of events, isn't there? Because in this one, this man has to die first. In that one, it's sort of the timeline.
Exactly the same time. Exactly the same timing. I'll set it up for you perfectly in time. Let me prove this to you. I see 1 or 2 doubtful faces. Let me prove to you that in this case, you do not want the man hit by the train, and in this case, you very much do. Can I prove it to you? Watch. Watch this. You divert the train, and while the train is proceeding along this track, at the very last moment, the fellow manages to get up and run away. Would you be happy?
Yes.
You'd be thrilled. Here, you push the man onto the track. Just before the train reaches him, he runs away. What would happen? You'd be devastated. 5 people are going to die. Is this clear?
Yes.
So isn't that a clear moral distinction?
Yes.
So why didn't you say so? Okay, so this is a clear, I'm not sure we agree with this Jewishly, but it's a clear moral distinction. And the point, again, to take home today is not whether you agree with this or not, It's the point that we respond before we think through it logically. We even know about this logic, and we have a moral instinct. Moral instinct. There's a good book about this. It's called Moral Minds by Professor Mark Hauser, a Jewish professor at Harvard. He wrote a book called Moral Minds, in which he gives people many moral scenarios and evokes their responses, and then asks them to explain why, and they don't know. Very interesting book. By the way, there's a fantastic book about these two scenarios. It's by Edmonds, who's a philosopher. It's called Would You Kill the Fat Man? Would You Kill the Fat Man? Wonderful book. He goes through the train scenarios, the man on the bridge, right? And many other scenarios that are more subtle to show you how you would respond. Let me tell you a Jewish answer to this. The great Chazon Ish in 1950-ish or thereabouts was faced with a similar question, and he issued a halachic ruling on this, and in fact he writes it in his halachic analysis. For those who'd like to look it up, it's in Choshen Mishpat in Sanhedrin Chaf Hey. It's a wonderful, wonderful source. Ask the rabbi maybe to learn through it with you. It's a fantastic. His language is very rich and complex, but it's a fantastic and classic piece. And here's what happened. The Chazon Ish was asked this question. Again, he died in 1954, so we're going back to the early years of the state. A man was driving his car down the Carmel mountain in Haifa. Have you been there? Very steep mountain. As he was coming down the mountain, the brakes failed. Actually, this was an Israeli driver. He'd never used the brakes before. Okay, he's coming down the mountain, brakes failed. No fault of his own. Okay, he checked the car, everything was legal. Some mechanical failure occurred, brakes failed. He found himself gathering speed and careening towards a bus stop in which 10 people were standing. He couldn't stop, but he could turn. But unfortunately, only to a place where one person was standing. Very similar to this scenario. I happened to be in the car, but basically out of control. If he does nothing, 10 people die. If he turns, they went to the rabbi after the fact and said, what should the man have done? And he said he should have turned the car. They said, Rabbi, that contradicts the Rambam. Maimonides rules that you can't kill one to save many. This unanimous rule in Judaism. Let me give you the background to this. The Talmud says, and the Rambam brings this down and codifies it legally. The Rambam says this. If a group of, it's a Talmud, but the Rambam is bringing it in practical Jewish law. If a group of people are surrounded by terrorists, a group of Jews, and they say, give us one Jew or we'll kill everyone, or one woman to molest or we'll molest them all, but let's stay with murder, are we allowed to send out one Jew to die? Even though everybody will die? There's no argument about this in Judaism. We are not allowed to do that. 100 people die, that's his problem. We're not allowed to do that. You cannot kill or give somebody to be killed. The Jerusalem Talmud has a fascinating debate about what happens if they name the person they want. They don't say give us one Jew. They say we want Finkelmovich. Here's our problem. That is a fascinating debate. Very briefly, the background to that debate is this. This is in the 8th parak of Trumas in the Jerusalem Talmud. There the Gemara says that can we yield a person who is designated, that's called yichdu, they've specified the person. You see in the Babylonian Talmud, most of the rabbis say, the reason we can't kill one person is because who are we to make the choice? Who are we to say you or you or you? But when they've named him, we're not making the choice. So the debate in the Jerusalem Talmud is this. The Gemara says there was a man called Sheva bin Bichri. He attacked King David. What is the punishment in Judaism for attacking the king?
Death.
Summary execution. But before David could kill him, he escaped. And he hid in the town of Avel. Now David's army, led by Yoav the general, surrounded the town. And Yoav gave the people of the town exactly that ultimatum. He said, if you don't give me Sheva bin Bichri, I'll kill everybody. What happened, in fact, was a very old lady called Serach Bas Asher climbed up on the ramparts, began debating the case halachically with Yoav, prevailed on the townspeople to kill him. They cut his head off and threw it over the wall. She saved the whole city. Says the Talmud, you see from this, that since he was named, you're allowed to kill him. You see, this is a good proof. Yoav didn't say, give me anybody. He said, I want Sheva bin Bichri. Since he specified him, you see that that's enough reason to yield someone rather than everyone die. What's wrong with this proof? Rabbi, I know you know. Did you hear what the rabbi said?
No.
He said, but he was guilty of a capital offense. How can you learn that from this case? Didn't take his black belt mind more than 1 second. That's what you're all about to say, right? Sheva bin Bichri wasn't only specified, he was guilty. And that's argument in the Talmud. Two opinions, Resh Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. One says the reason they killed him is because he was specified and guilty. The other one says they killed him because he was specified. He just happened to be guilty too. But that's more than sufficient. And that's an unresolved debate down to this day. The Rambam rules that we cannot kill such a person, the Rashba and others rule that we can. It's a fascinating debate. However, what comes out of this debate, the basic principle in Judaism is you cannot kill one to save many. So how come the Chazon Ish said, kill the one to save the 10? Let me make this clear before you attempt to answer. These are two exactly parallel situations. Let me make that clear. There's 10 people in front of me, my car's out of control. It's not me. If I do exactly nothing, 10 people die. If I turn and run down one innocent individual standing under a tree, nothing to do with the situation, thinking deep philosophical thoughts about human morality, I kill him, I save 10 people. Should I do that, said the rabbi? Yes. So number 2, 10 people in front of me. Terrorists say they're going to kill the 10 people. They give me a gun, Tatz. Shoot that innocent individual standing under a tree, thinking deep philosophical thoughts. Shoot him dead, we spare 10 people. Am I allowed to shoot him?
No.
No way. What's the difference? What is the difference if I shoot him dead to save 10 people, or run him down with my V8 four-wheel drive monster to save 10 people? What's the difference if I kill him with a car or a gun?
Well, this is a runaway car. You're not responsible. You're trying to limit the
Totally.
damage.
Totally.
You're limiting the damage.
And when I shoot him to limit the damage of 10 people?
With the car, a runaway car that hasn't got brakes.
Yes.
You're trying to minimise the damage.
But when I shoot him with a gun, I'm minimizing the damage. I'm saving 10 people.
No, you're not.
What are your words, minimize damage? They're both positive actions.
No, the other one is limiting the damage that would
You may be on the same track as the Chazon Ish.
the damage will be a lot worse.
No. That applies to both cases. Now you spoiled it. Let me say this. Let's get this clear. If you do nothing in both cases, 10 people die. If you kill in both cases, you save 10 people. And I'm asking you, what's different if you run him down and kill him, or you shoot him with a gun and kill him? I heard what you said. I think you...
Deliberately killing when you're trying to...
Running him down with my V8? Try to tell that to the judge. I think you're on the right track, but let's just think this through. Yes.
Is there a difference between saving people and killing people?
That is, between the two of you, that's a 10th Dan black belt answer. That's what the Chazon Ish said. Listen to what the rabbi said. He said, the two of them put it very beautifully. When you take a gun, listen to his words. Very subtle but very powerful. When you shoot this guy with a gun, you're doing it to save people. Ze ma'aseh retzicha. It's an act of murder. When you turn your car away from 10 people in the street, ze ma'aseh hatzalah. It's an act of salvation. Let's hear this again. Yes? When you take a gun and you murder somebody, that's an act of murder. The Torah doesn't allow it, not even to save people. But when your car is moving towards 10 people and you veer away, that's what a driver should be doing. It's true it's an act that kills one. But it's in the course of an act of salvation. Is this clear?
Yeah.
To make this a little clearer, I'm not asking you to agree, right? You know, by the way, the Chazon Ish doesn't quote any sources. This is his pure logic. And he writes this. Just to make it a little bit more clear to these gentlemen's distinction, let me put it like this. You're standing by the train track, train's coming down the line, about to wipe out 5 people. You can divert it. To save 5, you pull the lever. Most of you said you do that. You're a doctor in a hospital. You've got 5 people in organ failure. They desperately need transplants. The nurse walks in and says, "Doctor, there's a young man in the waiting room. He's come to visit his mum. Let's grab him, cut his throat, take 5 organs." Anyone? Anybody? What's the difference? If you commit an act of murder to save people, the Torah doesn't allow it. But in the course of an act of salvation, minimizing the damage, in an act of saving, then it may, he says, may be acceptable. Okay, this is a different logic than double effect. Would you like a real black belt question? But you have to sit on the edge of your seat for this and think. This is a real challenge. Even the rabbi may need a moment to think about this. I've just given you 2 different logical approaches to the same dilemma, correct? One is called double effect and one is the Chazon Ish. Double effect means, as we explained, is it a secondary effect? The rabbi's distinction is this an act of salvation or an act of murder? What difference does it make which logic I use? You know, whenever the Talmud gives you 2 solutions to a problem, it always follows up, L'mayin nafka mina. Who cares? If I say to you, I need to get back to Golders Green this evening, you say, well, you can take a taxi or you can take an underground. Hey, why are you giving me 2 options? Because one's cheap and one's expensive, one's fast and one's slow. There's got to be a difference. We never offer 2 solutions to a problem, halachically, if one will do. And that's just being academic. Is this clear? What is the difference whether I resolve this issue by showing you a distinction called double effect, or I show you a distinction on the rabbi's basis of an act of murder? What case will distinguish between the 2? What case will give us one answer if you use the one logic and a different answer if you use the other one? Do you see the challenge? Any offers?
In the diversion on the track, the man could run away. Why can't the man under the tree run away?
This fellow's tied up, just like the fellow on the bridge. Not only that,
You said he
he's fat too. No, I didn't. I only gave you an example. If you would escape and run away, you'd be happy with that.
Yes.
But that was only to show you that you don't want him killed. But in fact,
I don't want the man under the tree
but it's his death. Indeed. So that will make it parallel to the situation. Indeed, that could well be. Yes.
I think with the double effect,
Yes.
I think you are deciding on a certain action you need to take, and I think with the other one, what was the other one? What's the second one?
Cutting somebody's throat, cutting throat, taking his organs, or shooting the guy dead on the side.
No, come back to me.
Okay, let me give you a suggestion. I would suggest, I wouldn't be stubborn about, give me a scenario that distinguishes between the two.
In the first one,
Yeah.
the train is diverted away from the 5 people and
True.
there's no chance of the train being anywhere near them.
True.
In the second one, the man might not stop it.
You're
and
not
the train
allowed to do that. You're making practical difference between the cases.
But the train continues, may have momentum.
Maybe you mean this. Can I phrase what you might be saying? I think the difference would be a case like this. Watch carefully. The track doubles back on itself like this. Can you see that? Can you see that there? The train doubles back on itself. Now let's apply the two logics. Watch this. If you use double effect, could you divert the train?
No,
Because?
because it'll kill them anyway.
Because it'll kill him anyway on the back.
Yeah.
You need him smushed.
Yeah.
Which means that according to double effect, you couldn't do it.
No.
According to the Chazon Ish, I think you could. It's a diversion away from people.
It's a devotion back to people.
No. Again, the question that double effect asks is, do I need this death, or is it an ancillary unwanted effect? When the train track does this, I need him to be hit. That's going to save the people. Therefore, in this case, I couldn't do it according to double effect. But according to Chazon Ish, his question is, are you diverting away from people, or are you doing an act of murder? I think you would still admit that this is an act of diversion. Okay, yeah.
If the train doubles back, it can double back in both directions, so they'll all get wiped out.
Indeed, that's why but this guy will stop the train, of course. He's big enough to stop the... What?
Will you just stop the train?
Look how big he is. I drew him just as big as that guy. Okay. Let me leave you with one last dimension, if I may. Here's one last level, and we'll leave it at that. Many solutions have been proposed for these types of dilemmas, and I'll mention just one other, and that's known as utilitarianism. Utilitarian theory says that all you ever need to do is simply count the numbers. All this sort of it's all irrelevant. All this halachic and philosophical, just count the numbers. There's 5 against 1, always act to save the 5, no matter what it is you do to the 1. Very, very simple. All society ever needs to do is calculate the greatest good for the greatest number. The NHS is deciding whether they'll buy an expensive cancer drug. Take the numbers. And if it's 50-50, flip a coin. Beautifully simple system. Nothing is simpler than it, and it's never been accepted in Western society. Bernard Williams, the professor of philosophy at Cambridge, wrote a wonderful book called Morality, which is a lay people's book, and he has a whole chapter on this, which is very interesting. How would utilitarian theory look at this? By the way, utilitarianism, one of the main architects of utilitarian theory was Jeremy Bentham. Bentham lived, as you know, in London 150 years ago, wherever it was. He was a deacon at UCL. And by the way, if you'd like to visit him today, you can. Bentham, with all due respect, if you permit me to say this, some English people are a little eccentric. Bentham left in his will a request that he should not be buried, but preserved in a glass case in the entrance hall to UCL, and that's where he sits today. Not only that, he asked for his body to be wheeled out to every Senate meeting of the university, and indeed it is. They've stopped wheeling his body out, but they bring his head to the table. His head is in a box on the side. It's locked up because the King's College students used to steal it. So the head is wax. And as you walk into UCL today, on the side is a glass case, and Bentham's preserved body sits in the case. Right? And I pay my respects to him every time I go and speak to the medical students there. That's where he is, right? By the way, how do I know this? Not only because I've seen him, but because before I came to England, I read in a book called The Lev Arya. There's a book, Diane Grosness was one of the well-known Dayanim of the London based in the former generation. He was asked a question by a young student at UCL. He said, Rabbi, I study at UCL, I'm a Kohen. Every morning when I walk to my lectures, I walk through a hall with a dead man. Any Kohanim here? Am I allowed to walk through the hall? Isn't that an amazing question? So he writes as follows. He says, 1 second. A Kohen is not allowed no contact with a dead body. But to be in a space with a dead body only applies to Jewish bodies. Bentha was not Jewish. However, on second thoughts, the rabbi writes, a Kohen may have no contact with a grave of any sort. Maybe this is Bentham's grave. He's permanently interred here. Isn't that an amazing question? Walk around the hall. Anyway, the point is that Bentham was an architect, and he motivated very strongly, and he wrote about this, all you ever need to do, these distinctions are much too subtle, just count the numbers. And it's never been accepted. And the reason is, amazingly, and the best Williams can do is to say, because it doesn't feel right. And if it doesn't feel right, it's probably wrong, even though it is wonderfully logical. He gives a few examples, I'll just give you one. He says, imagine you're backpacking in South America, and you stumble into a little village high in the Peruvian Andes. And as you stumble into this village square, you see 20 men lined up against the wall about to be shot. And just before they shoot them, they see you. Inglese, welcome! In honor of Il Presidente's birthday, we're going to let you shoot one of these men and 19 walk free. They give you a gun, they stand there clapping their hands and speaking in Spanish and throwing their sombreros in there. Shoot any one of these 20 and you save 19. Raise your hand please if you shoot one. Not even one of you? Saving 19 lives? You might think about it. Says Williams, it doesn't feel right. The logic is perfect. You're saving 19 lives. It doesn't feel right. And that's probably good enough to tell us that it's wrong. And this has a long history. I'll just give you one example. In 1944, the V2 bombs were raining down on London, right? So here's what happened. You know, imagine a map of London, and the Germans were aiming at Westminster. The bombs were falling largely in Croydon. Now, there was no GPS or other what do you call it, navigation systems. There was dead reckoning, and the Germans very much needed to know whether their bombs were accurate. There had 2 agents in London, 2 secret agents. One was called Garbo and one was called Zigzag. Very interesting people. Zigzag was a guy called Eddie Chapman. You can read the very fascinating histories about these people. They were 2 agents radioing the Germans about where their bombs were falling. Unknown to the Germans, they were working for an organization called Double Cross, and they were secret British agents. So Churchill was telling them what to tell the Germans. And Churchill told them, tell the Germans their aim is good. He wanted the bombs to fall here. Croydon wasn't strategically important, and much less people. Westminster heavily populated, and when Churchill said that, there was a man in his cabinet called Harris, who was a working class man, he worked himself up. He publicly accused Churchill of killing people in Croydon. And Churchill said, I'm saving people in Westminster. Which is it? How was it resolved? There was a very aristocratic, crusty old gentleman present, who argued very forcefully that the bomb should be allowed to fall in Croydon, and his own parents lived in Croydon. When they said to him, how could you do that? He said, Mum and Dad would have wanted it that way. But anyway, that's how the argument was resolved. So the point is that these things have been proposed, and this has happened all the time. When the Germans killed 74,000 people at Hiroshima, the Americans, when they killed, they said, we're not murdering civilians, we're ending a war and saving who knows how many lives. Well, is it saving, is it killing? Right? You probably know that in the Atlantic shipping lanes during the war, the German code was broken at Bletchley Park, and the people there could have diverted a ship away from a submarine attack, but then the Germans would have known that their message is being interpreted, and the fellow who had the message let his own brother die on the ship, because it would have been, these are constantly with human society. Is this an act of saving? Is it an act of killing? What do you do? Anyway, the bottom line take home today is that the Torah attitude here obviously needs Torah wisdom and Torah moral principles, but the point is the ideal position of a person studying Torah is not to have some external algorithm imposed on you that does nothing for your personality. It should be a development of the deep, innate, sensitive human and Jewish personality to bring it to its moral and spiritual perfection. Thank you.